So without further ado, let's welcome Alan to the conference.
Thank you. Okay, can you all hear me? Yeah, smashing. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to step out of the search space for a little bit now just to talk about conversion rate optimization. So the reason why I'm going to do this is that, if you can improve the conversion rate of your website, it's obviously going to increase any ROI for spend on search, or not just search, on all channels. So I'm going to go through a simple 10-step process. Hopefully, you'll be able to, depending on what you're doing currently in terms of conversion rate optimization, I might give you a few ideas, maybe a couple of ways that you can improve what you're doing. Okay, so step one for me would be to tool up. Now, there's many tools on the market. I'm going to mention two. Apologies if anyone is selling a tool or works for a tool that I'm not going to mention. So I would recommend, if you're starting out, to use a tool like VWO, or Visual Website Optimizer, or Optimizely. Now, the reason why I mention both of these tools is they're very simple to use, plug-and-play software. So to install them, all you need to do is put one little bit of code on every page of your website, same as you would for Google Analytics. And then from there, within the tool, you can actually have an easy-to-use visual editor. So even myself, I'm no programmer, can go into the tool, you can drag and drop things, you can change text, you can change hyperlinks, you can change buttons, and this will create the page variation for you. There's no need to actually get developers involved. Alternatively, if you did want to get developers involved, the tool still has the power to have completely custom HTML, so you can go as simple or as advanced as you want. So the benefit of these tools, obviously, is therefore to remove any development roadblocks, and it's to speed up the process. Also, my thoughts on conversion rate optimization, it's basically about testing, so it's A/B tests or multivariate tests where you're comparing several pages at the same time. And there's obviously a lot of maths behind it for you to determine if one page is statistically better than another page. Now, these tools can automate that kind of data collection and that mathematics for you. It uses simple terminology like chance to beat. This has 95% chance to beat. When we get to 95%, I'm normally happy with that, and I'll treat that test as that variance as a winner, and then, and I'll move on. It's also really easy to customize the testing. So if you want to only test on desktop, it's really easy to do. If you want to exclude certain browsers like IE7, which tends not to work so well anymore, sorry, James, then you can do that. It's really easy. So step two is deciding what to test. Okay, so this is a pretty important step. It's also one of the, it's one of the most fun steps. It's probably the easiest. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about understanding your audience and things like that. I know Baz is going to talk about that later. For me, I would always start in Google Analytics. It's a great tool. If you just want to get started, you can have a look at top landing pages that have a high bounce rate, or you can make your way through your most common conversion funnel, your path to conversion, and have a look if any of those pages have a high exit rate, and then try and understand what it is that this page isn't answering, or what it is that users aren't getting when they're at this page. Now, I mentioned testing pages with high traffic. Now, the reason for this is, as I said, you need the data to tell you whether the result is statistically significant. If the data's not there, it's going to take forever. So unless there's a lot of traffic, you're not actually going to get a result very, very quickly, and you're not going to get a very good ROI from your investment. Make significant changes. Now, significant, I don't mean change the entire page. You want to be changing one feature. For example, if you're changing more than one feature, you probably want to go to a multivariate test where you want to see which changes are actually making the difference. But you need to make a change that is actually going to affect conversion rate. There's no point changing just a couple of words on a page, because it's going to convert exactly the same as the old page, and you'll have just wasted your time. And you've not just wasted your time, that time was an opportunity when you could have been making a difference improvement. Also, very important, check all your tests with different departments in the company or agencies that you're using. You don't want to get to the point where, I don't like all this text on this page, it's ruining the design, and then that's actually the content that's helping you rank for SEO, and then you lose your listings. You need to speak to the PPC team, your design team, make sure that it's still all on brand, and obviously the development team. So the next step for me, this is the most important step, is actually planning the tests. So deciding what you actually want to test, that's relatively easy. Now, how you're actually going to go about it and the order in which you run the tests is absolutely key. So if you run your tests in the wrong order, as I said, you're going to be wasting your time and you're going to be missing an opportunity to make more improvements. So for this, I would recommend using the pie analysis framework. So pie analysis is just literally where you give each of your tests a score based on potential, importance, and ease. So in terms of potential, you're basically looking at the value of the current traffic on that page. You're also looking at potentially, if you've run a similar test somewhere else on the site or on another website, what kind of impact that test had there. So you're using historical data to think, how likely is this to improve my conversion rate? And do I think it's going to increase my conversion rate a little bit or a lot? Obviously, the ones that you think is going to have a really good impact on your conversion rate, you want to give a higher score so that they actually rank higher. In terms of importance, you're obviously thinking of the importance of the page or the importance of the feature on the page, but also speak to people in your business, speak to your marketing team. It might be that your PPC team are about to run a really big generic spend and a really big display spend in a certain section of the site. There's going to be an awful lot more traffic visiting that section of the site, so you might want to integrate your testing with something that they're messaging in their ads. Also, speak to your developers. They might be changing that page in the next sprint anyway, so you don't want to be wasting your time there. Alternatively, if your developers are planning on introducing a new feature and you're not too sure about it, then test the new feature in a tool first, so you can avoid getting a negative ROI. Not every new feature to a site is going to improve the conversion rate, so you might want to test it first. So after that, you move on to ease. So ease is, so first thing you need to do is, okay, can I actually set this test up? Is it possible? And if it's possible to set up as a test, is it actually possible to implement on my CMS? If it's not, then that needs to go right down to the bottom of the queue. Then you need to consider your resource. If you know that you're not going to get any developer resource, you need to keep the test quite simple so that you can just move things and set it up yourself. If you know that you've got developer resource, for example, like at the start of the month, at the end of the month, you can obviously plan your tests accordingly. So what you want to end up with basically is, for all of your tests, it's a score, and you simply rank them so that the most important tests with the greatest potential and ones that you can actually set up are at the top of your list, and they're the ones that you test first. Finally, what you need to do is, as you're actually planning each of your tests, you need to agree what the KPI is going to be for those. So what metric, what conversion rate are you actually going to be testing? So as I said, it's all based on data. So the more data you have, the faster you're going to get a result. So if I've got an e-commerce site and I'm making a change on the homepage, my KPI for that test might not be a full conversion through to transaction. I might just say, okay, if someone adds to basket, then for this test, that's a good enough KPI. It's then down to the checkout funnel and testing the checkout funnel to actually get them to conversion. So you're going to get an awful lot more people adding to basket than you are, actually transacting. So your test can probably, if you get twice as many, your test is going to take half the amount of time. That means you can get a learning faster and move on to the next test. Okay, step 4, so we actually get around to building the tests. I would recommend that you build several tests per stream. So by stream, I mean, if you've got, for example, a site that sells car insurance and life insurance, you can treat your car insurance side of your site as one stream and run tests on that. And at the same time, you can have another stream for life insurance and run tests separately on that. So if you've got a roadmap with your pie analysis scores of all the tests that you want to run on both of them, I wouldn't just build the first one. I'd build the next probably 2 as well. This means that when your first test ends, or if you're running that test and you feel, I'm not getting a good result here, it's been 2 weeks and it's still 50-50, but it's not going anywhere, then end that test and move on quickly. So there's no downtime, and also you're not hanging around for a result that's actually not going to be a significant change in your site anyway. Don't forget to configure your test settings. It's really, really important, as I've said before, that you need to set up all your tracking, make sure you set up, if you're using Google Analytics, set up segments. So we find it best practice as we're setting up the test to go to segment and analytics, so you can view just the data that's viewed each actual page variation, so that you can view everything in Google Analytics, you can compare. So after you've built your test, another really important step is to actually check them, okay? So don't trust the preview tool. Don't trust yourself that you've not made a mistake. Don't trust your developers that they've set it up correctly. You know, you need to test these in a live environment. Now, how I would test it in a live environment is to change the settings of the test. So you're targeting only your own IP address, and then just set the test live. We have a thorough checklist for each of our clients, so I'd recommend you create your own, which is relevant to your own site. But you're not just looking at, you know, if it renders correctly and, you know, whether the images that you change display correctly. You know, check any features. So if you've got a filter, check that the filter still works. If you have any hoverovers, check they still work and all the information is still displayed correctly. And don't forget to check multiple browsers and you know, multiple devices. So as a rule, I'll normally check, you know, Chrome and Firefox on my desktop, then I'll check on an iPad, then I'll check on an Android phone. You know, I'll do those, but for everything else and all the different versions of the browsers, I'll use something like BrowserStack or Source Labs. Once I'm happy that the tests are all working and they look correctly, and I'm happy to actually show this to people, you know, that I've not actually broken the site in some way, then what I'll do is I'll adjust my settings so that I'm targeting a small percentage of users. So depending on how much traffic you get to your site, you might be looking at, you know, 10 to 20% of your users. And you set this live, and you're just watching, you know, the tool that you're using, VWO, for example, and Google Analytics. You want to make sure that your tracking that you've set up is actually working. You want to make sure that your goals are pulling through into your tool. You want to make sure that all your users and your segments are set up. If it isn't working, then there's no point setting your test live fully because the data is going to be useless. You're going to have to start again. So usually about an hour of this, you set it live for an hour. And if everything's working fine, you obviously revert the settings, flush the data. When I mean flush the data, it just literally means it wipes it to a clean slate. So you've not got any of your testing data, you know, in the actual experiment. And then, finally, we can launch our tests. So we're up to step 6, and we've finally just launched some tests. Okay. So I tend to start tests at the start of the day. This is just because, again, even though I've done all my checks, I'm watching the data, making sure it's working correctly. There's no point starting a test at night, realizing that, you know, it's not working and then no one's around to fix it. You're always ensuring that you've got correct tracking and keeping an eye on performance. And what I think is key to ROI is that on a weekly basis, I'll update my Pi scores. So based on how the test is running so far, the potential score that I've given it might increase or might reduce. So if after a week it's still only, say, 60% for one variant and 40% for the other, then I'm thinking there's probably another test that I can do here that's going to give me a more significant result. So if I'm like that after 2 weeks, I'll pause that test and I'll move on to the next one. So there's no point hanging around for a test that isn't actually going to improve your conversion rate. Just move it to one side, park that, and move on to the next one. And if you've built up several per stream, you know, you can do that instantly. The next step, unfortunately, is be patient. So, like I said, you review it every week, and after a week, you can have a look at your data. But I wouldn't really look at it any sooner than that. So the problem is looking at your test, like really trying to analyze your data too soon, is that you can jump to conclusions, and that can be, you know, a costly mistake. So many times I've seen, you know, in the first couple of days, you know, a variant page that I've created, which is my, you know, personal favorite, is winning, and it's like, great, it's already at 80% chance to beat. But by the end of the week, it's on a complete U-turn, okay? So you want to define a cycle. So a cycle is just a period of time that you know, is long enough so that you're not going to get one day or some sort of extraordinary event skewing your data. So we'd usually say a cycle would be a week. Now, you always need to, at the very least, run a test for a full cycle. So even if it's 99%, you know, chance to beat the original after 6 days, I'll still run it for that final day, okay? And on that final day, when I'm planning on pausing that test, I've already got my next test set up, ready to go at the same time. So as one goes down, the next one goes up. So moving on to step 8 would be to actually make the permanent changes. So you've run some tests, you've made some learnings, you know you've now proven that changing this is actually going to improve your conversion rate. You want to actually go away and make some permanent changes. You actually want to implement these changes on your site. So I would apply the learnings that I've made across the site wherever it's valid. So as an example, if I was testing something on one of my top product pages and I found it to be successful, I'd make that change on all the products in that category. But if I go back to my insurance example, if you try something that works for your car insurance funnel, it might not necessarily work for your life insurance funnel. but it might do, so you can add that to your roadmap. You can do a pie analysis on that, and if it was a really successful test, give it a high potential score, and then that will feed into the roadmap there, and you can validate it on a different funnel. Depending on how your web resource works, particularly maybe if you use an agency and you kind of pay per job, you might want to wait until you've got several winners. So you might want to just on a monthly basis, send them all down to the web dev teams rather than giving them small jobs all the time. And also, share your learnings with the business. Don't just keep it to yourself. Don't forget to tell people how good you are and what success you've had. Quite often people will give you their feedback and reasons why they think it's won. And that can all add to your, that can go right back into the cycle. It can add back into your roadmap. You can update pie scores, you can update important scores based on what people say to you. Step 9 is pretty easy, is rinse and repeat. If it's working, keep on doing it. As I said, keep expanding and updating your roadmap. Keep on using the pie scores. If something becomes not important anymore because let's say we're reducing the advertising spend there, for example, then change the score. There's no point trying to optimize an area that's not going to be getting much traffic. Don't get complacent with your QAs. There's always something that can go wrong. Probably about 50% of the tests that we set up when we QA, we find something small that we have to tweak. So always make sure that you go through that thorough checklist on different browsers. If you do find that it doesn't work on mobile very well at all, it doesn't shrink down, you just exclude mobile. And obviously, the more you test, the more learnings you're going to have, and hopefully, the more winners you're going to have, and the more you can increase your conversion rate. So the last step for me would be to build a bank. Now, what I mean by build a bank is to create a knowledge bank. So every single test that we ever run, we will take a print screen of the page. We'll keep all the data in a safe place, all the learnings, all the discussion points, and obviously the conclusions you want to keep. Now, ideally, you want to keep these all in one document. It will help plan for future tests. So as I said before, when you're looking at the potential of a test, rather than just guessing, I think this looks much better, that's going to double my conversion rate. You can have a look at something that you've tested, a similar feature in the past, and see how that test worked out. Also, if in 2 years' time we've finally decided that you want an entirely new website, you can be the person who brings to the table, well, here's a list of best practices that I know for a fact works well for our brand, for our audience. We should include this in our new website. So in summary, as I said, the most important step for me would be the planning stage, getting the order of the tests that you run right, deciding on what the KPIs so that the results are going to be valid, but also to get the results as quickly as possible. Always QA your tests, don't get complacent there, and always make sure that you're constantly checking that your tracking is working and the data is pulling through, because otherwise the test is going to be redundant. Review your data weekly, not too soon, but on a weekly basis review your pie scores, and don't be afraid to pause a test. You can always come back to it later and move on to something that's got more potential or is more important. And maximize your learnings, maximize it across the site, maximize it by spreading it across the business. Okay, I think I've got time for questions, if anyone's got any questions.